You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. The lure of seclusion was a siren song I couldn't ignore, a promise whispered against the city's cacophony and the thin walls of my rented existence. Solitude, clean air, a mental landscape wiped clear. These were the treasures I sought in that remote country house. A simple equation, I thought. Isolation plus a hearth equals peace. I arrived under a pale Thursday sun, the crunch of gravel beneath my tires, the first note in a symphony of anticipated quiet. My ambitions were modest. Repose. Simple sustenance cooked over a flame. The oblivion of sleep coaxed by firelight on a worn sofa. The first frost-kissed night, however, rewrote the entire score. Stepping across the threshold near midday, my luggage thudding onto the floorboards, I embarked on an immediate reconnaissance. The main room unfolded generously, dominated by a hulking relic of a sofa aimed squarely at a stone hearth that clawed its way toward the ceiling. Ancient timbers groaned overhead with every footfall. The kitchen, a cramped affair, offered the bare essentials: refrigerator, stove, a sink beneath a lone window framing a dense copse of trees. An aroma of stale linen and disuse clung to the bedroom air. Cobwebs, delicate and silvered, festooned the closet corners, remnants of unseen tenants I swiped away, refusing to dwell on nocturnal scuttlings. Provisions required a 15-minute drive. Canned soups, bread, water, the staples of temporary hermitage. Near the store, a roadside stand offered firewood, its proprietor cautioning that the nights here possessed a deeper chill than daytime mildness might suggest. A warning I tucked away, unconcerned. Evening descended, and with it, the ritual of the first fire. Logs stacked, kindling arranged, a struck match blooming into life. Flames embraced the wood, their soft percussion filling the living room's expanse. Cocooned in a blanket on the sofa, I surrendered to their hypnotic dance, flickering light animating the walls with ephemeral shadow plays. The city's frantic pulse, the deadlines, the gnawing anxieties, all receded, dissolved in the primal comfort of the blaze. Perhaps 20 minutes passed in this reverie before the fire's rhythm faltered. Something aberrant in the flames drew my gaze. I leaned in, eyes narrowed. For a disorienting instant, the impossible geometry of a human visage seemed to coalesce within the inferno. The suggestion of eyes, the curve of cheekbones, a chin sculpted from light and shadow. Surely, I reasoned, a trick of the log placement, an optical fluke. I rubbed my eyes fiercely, blinking. Gone. As swiftly as it had materialized, the impression vanished. Yet a glacial tremor traced my spine, my mouth suddenly arid. Coincidence, I insisted silently. Firelight phantoms. Nevertheless, unease prickled. Retrieving a glass from the kitchen, I downed water in quick gulps, then returned to poke aggressively at the logs with the iron poker, disrupting their configuration, hoping to exorcise the illusion. The face did not return. As the fire dwindled to embers, I added another log, seeking sustained warmth before curling up on the sofa and drifting into sleep. Deep night, around 2, and I awoke violently shivering. The hearth held only dying orange sparks. My breath plumed visibly in the frigid air. Scrambling up, chafing warmth back into my arms, I rebuilt the fire, stacking wood with deliberate care. The flare of the match, the hesitant catch of tinder, the burgeoning flames. I watched, my heart hammering an anxious tattoo against my ribs, waiting. Would it reappear? Initially, there was only fire, bright and ordinary, spitting sparks. Then, held captive by my own morbid focus, I saw it resolve again from the swirling heat. Sharper this time, lips that seemed to twist, though no sound emerged. A constriction seized my chest, my breathing turning shallow and rapid. The fine hairs on my arms lifted. I blinked again. But the visage held for 5, maybe 6, suspended seconds before dissolving back into the fiery chaos. I retreated, legs unsteady, clutching a throw pillow to my chest like a shield. My pulse thudded, a frantic drummer beneath my ribs. A thick, acrid miasma crept from the chimney, damp soot and ancient ash stinging my nostrils. Smoke, refusing the chimney's draw, unspooled in thin, searching tendrils across the ceiling, seeming to trace the dark lines of the beams. Hallucination. Exhaustion. I scrubbed at my face, desperate for a rational anchor. Sleep in that room was now unthinkable. I fled to the bedroom, shut the door, and burrowed under the covers, still fully clothed. My skin felt clammy, my breath hitched. Sleep was a distant shore, reachable only through sheer, bone-deep weariness, the fiery face imprinted on the inside of my eyelids. Morning brought a dull throbbing behind my eyes, and a knot of dread low in my stomach. After forcing down dry bread, I flung open every window, inviting the crisp air to purge the lingering scent of smoke that permeated the living room. A faint, sooty residue darkened the corners of the hearth. Cleaning the ashes became a deliberate, almost ritualistic act, scooping and sweeping with hands that still trembled slightly, hoping normalcy could be restored through diligence. Tiredness, I told myself. Just tired. The day was spent largely outdoors, tracing a faint path behind the house, kicking through fallen leaves beneath skeletal oaks. Sunlight on my shoulders offered a temporary balm, a few hours of feeling almost grounded. But as evening bled across the sky, the temperature plummeted, and I found myself standing once more before the fireplace, a reluctant supplicant. It was just shadows, just my mind playing tricks, I argued internally. With a resigned sigh, I laid the wood, my fingers stiff with a tension that belied my forced calm. Fire bloomed. I sat, watchful, crackling flames, rising heat, normalcy held for a time. Then, inevitably, it returned. The face, lingering longer now. Its eyes, pools of incandescence, seemed to shift, scanning the room with unnerving focus. The mouth stretched open, a silent gasp, like someone starved of air, yet the only sound remained the relentless consumption of wood. My hands balled into fists. A wave of weakness washed through my legs. I gripped the sofa's armrest for support. Every nerve ending felt electrified. The frantic drumming in my ears intensified. Again, the smoke eddied near the ceiling, weaving patterns along the beams. I backed away instinctively, step by careful step, until the kitchen counter pressed against my spine. My gaze remained locked on the hearth. The face appeared to track my movement, its fiery gaze pinning me. On pure reflex, I snatched the fire extinguisher from beneath the sink, aiming the nozzle, finger hovering over the trigger. Stop it. Douse it. but a perverse curiosity warred with primal fear. Was the chimney blocked? Was something inside? Yet, instinct screamed against approaching, against seeking a mundane explanation for something that felt profoundly unearthly. As suddenly as it appeared, the visage dissolved. The flames settled into their familiar, chaotic dance. I stood panting by the counter, the extinguisher heavy in my trembling grip, knuckles white. Slowly, carefully, I set it down. My throat felt raw, swallowing difficult. Water did little to soothe the dryness. The air tasted thick, smoky, laced with an unplaceable mustiness. Escape. I needed air that wasn't tainted. Jacket on, keys in hand, I fled to my car, chest tight, breath shallow. A nearby diner offered anonymous refuge. I huddled at the counter, nursing coffee, tracing the faded lines of the menu without seeing them. The waitress moved around me, oblivious. Gradually, the frantic rhythm in my chest subsided, my shoulders easing fractionally. 2 hours I lingered, consuming a burger and far too much coffee, postponing the inevitable return. Back at the house, late now, the living room was a cold, dark cavity. The hearth held only cold ash. I sat in the oppressive stillness, debating the wisdom of rekindling the fire. My body recoiled at the thought. The house itself felt heavier, the air viscous. A shiver ran through me despite my thick sweater. Leaving felt right, driving through the night back to the familiar city din. But another part, stubborn and morbidly fascinated, whispered, "Just one more time. See what happens." Match poised, I lit the kindling, standing close, then retreating as the flames took hold. Minutes passed uneventfully. I studied the logs, rough bark, fissures, knots, searching for any natural pattern that might mimic features. Nothing. They were just wood. And then it manifested. Centered in the blaze, seeming to press outward, straining against the fiery veil. The lips parted, cheeks hollowing as if drawing a desperate, silent breath. Only the hiss and crackle of combustion reached my ears. Vertigo threatened. My head swam, the room tilted. I forced my eyes open, fighting the urge to faint. My hands shook uncontrollably. Breath tore raggedly from my lungs. Sweat trickled down my temple, cold despite the fire's proximity. The expression on the face, pure, unadulterated torment. A sympathetic pressure built in my own chest, a phantom drag toward the flames. My fingers tingled. That thick, smoky odor intensified, mingled with the persistent, musty undertone. Then I saw it clearly. The smoke wasn't just eddying near the ceiling. It was actively creeping into the room, forming sinuous, deliberate lines that gathered in the corners, advancing. My eyes burned. Each inhalation felt like sandpaper, oxygen scarce. A cough ripped through me. Stumbling backward, I fumbled for the window latch, throwing it open. Icy night air rushed in, a shocking relief. I gasped it down, vision blurring momentarily. When I spun back to the fireplace, the face was gone. The flames burned with placid normalcy, the smoke now obediently rising toward the chimney. Shaking violently, I collapsed onto the sofa. My heartbeat hammered against my eardrums. Even with the window open, the room felt stagnant, heavy. The soft crackle of the dying fire, the faint settling creaks of the old house. Every sound amplified. I remained there for an hour, maybe more, trapped between exhaustion and terror, too wired to sleep, too drained to move. Every shadow flickered with potential menace. My gaze kept returning to the hearth, anticipating. It remained empty. Eventually, The last ember died. Pulling an extra blanket around me, I slept fitfully on the sofa. The window still cracked open, punctuated by jolting awakenings, gasping, heart pounding. Once, a whisper seemed to brush my ear, but opening my eyes revealed only silence and the kitchen clock's steady tick. In the days that followed, I waged a futile campaign against the phenomenon. I found a long-handled brush in the shed and scrubbed the chimney flue, dislodging clouds of soot. I called a local chimney sweep. They couldn't come for a week. I purchased new firewood from a different source, clinging to the hope that the original logs were somehow peculiar. It made no difference. Whenever the fire burned, the face would manifest, at least once. Each appearance felt longer, the silent movements of the mouth more frantic, imbued with a desperate, voiceless plea. The smoke continued its unsettling dance, often pooling beneath the beams before reluctantly dissipating. One afternoon, driven by a need for proof, I propped my phone on a chair, aimed it at the hearth, and recorded. Playback revealed only flickering flames, bursts of light, nothing resembling the clear visage I witnessed with my own eyes. Quick, indistinct flickers, perhaps, easily dismissed. It was as if the presence refused digital capture, existing only in the vulnerable space of direct perception. Night after night, I succumbed to an exhausted, haunted sleep, the stale air settling deep in my lungs. Questions swirled, unanswerable. Sharing this felt impossible. The inevitable diagnoses, stress, delusion, a need for therapy, were predictable and unhelpful. I felt a perverse need to understand, to find an explanation that didn't fracture my own sanity, but none came. The house grew increasingly claustrophobic. The smell of old smoke became my second skin, clinging to my clothes, my hair. Sleep deprivation frayed my nerves, leaving my muscles perpetually clenched. Trips for supplies became exercises in strained nonchalance, my eyes darting, searching faces, wondering if my internal haunting was somehow visible. My reflection showed dark hollows beneath my eyes, a permanent crease between my brows. I lived in anticipation of escalation, some final, terrible act. Each time the face formed, I braced myself, yet it only ever watched, its silent anguish radiating from the flames. That passive torment, however, was corrosive. My curiosity became a cage. After nearly 2 weeks, worn down to a raw nerve, I conceded defeat. One brittle morning, I gathered my belongings, loaded the car, and locked the heavy door behind me. A final glance into the living room revealed the cold, empty hearth, the air still feeling thick and watchful. I turned away, started the engine, and drove, the crunch of gravel fading behind me. The memory remains indelible. The way the fiery mouth worked, the oppressive weight of the smoke clinging to the ceiling. Sometimes, even now, lighting a simple candle in my own apartment triggers a pause, a held breath, waiting for something impossible to shimmer into view within the small flame. It never does, but the feeling lingers. A sense of being observed, a presence just outside my peripheral vision. I think often of that silent mouth, opening and closing in the heart of the fire, forever trying to articulate something I couldn't hear. What message it carried, I never learned, and perhaps I never truly want to. That house remains a sealed chapter, but the image of those eyes, burning bright and meeting mine from the flickering depths, will never fully leave me. Never did I conceive that a piece of cheap art, unearthed from the dusty depths of some forgotten bazaar, could fracture my perception of the world. Yet, it did. The very day that canvas crossed my threshold marked the genesis of an insidious wrongness, a creeping alteration of the real. I feel compelled to articulate the sequence, precisely as it unfolded, without embellishment or obfuscation. This isn't a plea for understanding, merely a desperate anchor, an attempt to catalog events before the erosion of self becomes absolute. I spotted it tucked away, almost hidden, within the chaotic jumble of a merchant's stall. The proprietor, an elderly man swimming in a crumpled shirt, offered me barely a glance. There it leaned, propped against the splintered leg of a chair, a formal portrait, seemingly 19th century, depicting a gentleman encased in stark black attire. Behind him, a tempestuous skyscape brewed in shades of slate and charcoal. But the face was an absence, a vacant oval where human features ought to reside. A peculiar magnetism emanated from it. An illogical desire bloomed within me. When I inquired about the price, the old man merely shrugged, his gaze finally meeting mine, and named a sum so negligible it felt almost like theft, not to acquire it. Money changed hands, and the painting, unsettlingly light, was mine, carried under my arm like a found secret. Back in my apartment, I rested it against the living room wall, grounding it on the floorboards. No nail readily presented itself, no vacant hook beckoned, and besides, its proper place felt uncertain. For several minutes I stood before it, scrutinizing that blank expanse, searching for the faintest ghost of eyes, a nose, a mouth. Nothing. Only a smooth vacancy, as if time itself had bleached the pigment away. The subject wore a jacket with a high, stiff collar, one hand poised delicately upon a carved table. The backdrop seethed with grayish, roiling clouds, yet conveyed no violence of storm, just an oppressive, stagnant gloom. Deciding to let it be, I retreated to the kitchen, the mundane task of preparing a solitary dinner, a temporary shield. Evening descended, bringing with it a profound agitation. I sprawled on the sofa, flicking through television channels with disinterest, my gaze repeatedly snagged by the painting across the room. That featureless void gnawed at me. An uncanny sensation of being observed prickled my skin, despite the utter lack of eyes to do the watching. Unable to bear it, I rose and turned the canvas to face the wall, its back a shield against the unease. Just fatigue, I reasoned, the residue of a long day. Later, cocooned in bed, I stared at the familiar geography of my ceiling. The apartment hummed with its usual low thrum, the refrigerator's cycle, the distant sigh of traffic. I shut my eyes, willing sleep to come. Around 2 a.m, a sound pierced the quiet. My name, spoken softly. Chillingly, it was rendered in my own voice, a faint susurration drifting from the living room. My chest constricted. My mouth went parchment dry. A frantic drumbeat commenced against my ribs, loud enough, it seemed, to echo in the stillness. Dismiss it, I told myself. A hypnagogic trick, a dream fragment clinging to wakefulness. But then it came again, distinct and undeniable. Arthur, it whispered, the timbre uncannily mine. Cold floor met bare feet as I swung my legs out of bed. The hallway light, usually off, flared into existence at my touch. Holding my breath, I moved towards the living room threshold. I scanned the space. The painting remained where I'd left it, its back turned. The room was empty of intruders, yet the air felt heavier, imbued with a sudden, inexplicable chill that raised gooseflesh along my arms and neck. Drawn forward, I approached the averted canvas. A faint rustling, like the whisper of shifting fabric, brushed the edge of my hearing. An illogical, powerful urge seized me. Turn it around. See if something had changed. Foolish, my rational mind insisted, to be unnerved by old paint and canvas. Yet my hand trembled as I grasped the wooden frame, spinning it to face me once more. The composition was unaltered, the somber gentleman, the gloomy sky, but the facial void was no longer perfectly smooth. A subtle topography had emerged. I could discern the barest suggestion of a jawline, a faint curvature hinting at cheeks, the nascent curve of a chin. A bead of sweat traced a path down my temple. Tentatively, I reached out, intending to touch the surface, to probe for cracking paint or some hidden layer beneath. The texture beneath my fingertips felt uneven, lumpy almost, as if something stirred beneath the surface. I snatched my hand back, struggling to regulate my breathing. The whispers ceased, but the room felt charged, hostile. Backing away, I fled to my bedroom, shutting the door, twisting the lock. Sleep, when it finally claimed me, was a thin, troubled veil. Morning arrived with a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. My first instinct was to check the painting. Part of me anticipated normalcy, expected to find my fears unfounded. But a closer inspection confirmed the impossible. The features were solidifying. Not complete by any means, but the architecture of cheekbones was now discernible, faint shadows pooling where eyes should be. A wave of icy cold washed through me. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. Paintings do not spontaneously generate faces. This couldn't be real. Perhaps stress, hallucination. I fumbled for my phone, captured an image, compared it to a photograph taken the previous day upon its arrival. The disparity was stark, undeniable. Today's image showed definition, nascent form, where yesterday's held only blankness. Breakfast was a trial. Cereal turned to paste in my mouth, barely swallowed. The apartment felt suffocating. I fled to work, seeking refuge in routine. The entire day passed under a cloud of jittery apprehension. A colleague, noticing my silence, inquired if I felt unwell. I muttered a denial, eyes constantly drifting to the clock, dreading the inevitable return. But where else could I go? Evening found me back at my door. Stepping inside, the living room air seemed stale, carrying a peculiar odor. Old wood, damp cloth, something else, indefinable. With a lump forming in my throat, I approached the canvas again, listening intently. Silence. But when I switched on the lamp, illuminating the painting's surface, I froze. The vacant oval now held the distinct suggestion of eyes. Not fully rendered, but hollows existed in the correct locations. The faint arch of eyebrows hovered above them. My skin grew clammy. I rubbed my arms compulsively, trying to dispel the prickling unease. Calm down, Arthur, I commanded myself, stepping back. Just calm down. An idea surfaced. Containment. I had to do something. I carried the painting, it felt heavier now, to a small storage closet near the bathroom. Inside it went, plunged into darkness. I shut the door firmly. Then, yielding to a primal urge, I dragged a small, sturdy dresser in front of the closet door, barricading it, sealing it away. Perhaps this would grant me peace. The remainder of the evening was spent feigning normalcy, the television a flickering distraction. But a persistent echo lingered in the back of my mind. My own voice, a siren call towards the closet. Around midnight, the strain became unbearable. I rose, compelled, walked to the closet, pressed my ear against the cool wood. Again, the whisper, soft but perfectly clear, articulating my name in my own cadence. My hands shook, nausea churned within me. Shoving the dresser aside, I wrenched open the door, pulled the painting into the light. The face. It was more defined still. The shape of the eyes, the structure of the nose. They bore a startling, nascent resemblance to my own reflection. The hairline mirrored mine. The set of the jaw felt intimately familiar. With a strangled gasp, I dropped the painting. It struck the floor with a dull, muffled thud. I stood over it, breath ragged, mind reeling. I couldn't have it in my home. Expulsion seemed the only answer, yet the memory of the bazaar, the indifferent seller, the ease of acquisition, it felt purposeful, weighted. Discarding it felt insufficient, perhaps even dangerous. What if it simply returned? Still, its presence was intolerable. I leaned it against the hallway wall, face averted once more. That night, every light in the apartment blazed. Sleep remained elusive. Each creak of the building, every distant siren, translated into soft, stealthy footsteps in the hall. I woke repeatedly, drenched in sweat, mouth sour, convinced I wasn't alone. Sometimes I'd stand in my bedroom doorway, peering into the shadowed hallway at the dark rectangle propped against the wall, feeling as though it were drawing vitality from me, leaving my limbs heavy, my chest tight. Was I losing my grip? But daylight always brought the chilling confirmation. The painting, its evolving face mirroring my own. This was no mere stress reaction. Over the ensuing days, the transformation accelerated. Each viewing revealed features sharpening, solidifying, becoming undeniably mine. By the fourth day, ambiguity vanished. The painting's facial structure was a direct echo of my own. The eyes held a similar hue, albeit flatter, less alive. The lips curved precisely as mine did. Even the fall of hair seemed styled in mimicry. Catching my own reflection became a disquieting experience. My eyes looked diminished, weary, as if gazing at a fading facsimile. The whispers persisted, growing bolder. No longer confined to the night, they ambushed me in daylight. My name, spoken in my voice, seeming to emanate from just behind my shoulder. I'd spin around, finding only empty air. Once, mid-afternoon in the kitchen, the intimacy of the whisper startled me so profoundly, I dropped a stack of plates. The shattering crash jolted me, nearly sending me stumbling. As I gathered the glittering shards, my trembling hands reflected in their surfaces. I scrutinized my own face, searching for subtle changes, fearing a transference, a siphoning of self onto the canvas. Sleep offered no respite. I lay rigid in bed, hyper-aware of every nocturnal sound, convinced phantom footsteps paced the hallway. Often, I'd rise and stand sentinel at my door, staring at the painting's dark shape, feeling its pull, a strange, draining magnetism. My arms would tingle, a pressure built behind my eyes. The thoughts spiraled. Perhaps I was unraveling. One night, resolve hardened within me. I had to confront it. I illuminated the apartment with every available light. I stood the painting upright on a chair, forcing myself to study it. My fingers traced the painted surface. It felt inexplicably warm, like living tissue. A visceral revulsion churned in my gut. My breathing grew shallow. I recognized minute details mirroring my own physiognomy. A faint scar high on my forehead, the specific curve of my ear. Pressing a hand to my chest, attempting to quell the frantic rhythm of my heart, I spoke into the charged silence. "What do you want?" A beat of stillness, then a tingling sensation spread through my arms, a faint pressure in my skull. The whisper returned, closer now, intimate. "Come closer." Blind panic surged. I shoved the painting violently. It tumbled, landing face up on the carpet, the frame digging into the pile. I stood above it, panting, trapped in indecision. From a kitchen drawer, I retrieved a roll of heavy duct tape. With shaking hands, I began wrapping it around the frame, attempting to seal the image away, to blind it. Covering the face itself felt repellent, terrifying, so I focused on the borders, the tape tearing raggedly in my unsteady grip. I managed to obscure much of it, though glimpses of the face remained visible through gaps. Then, I wrestled the taped monstrosity into a large black garbage bag, cinching it tight. This grim parcel I dragged into my bedroom. A foolish sanctuary, perhaps. If it could whisper across rooms, surely a bedroom wall was no barrier. Yet having it contained, hidden behind my bed, offered a sliver of illusory control. That night, the whispers coalesced into something new, a soft, incessant chanting of my name. My own voice multiplied, echoing not from one direction, but seemingly from the very air around me. I clamped my hands over my ears, shouted, "Stop it!" into the oppressive soundscape, but the litany continued, relentless. My body locked in tension, neck rigid, eyes burning from exhaustion. Eventually, mercifully, oblivion claimed me. I awoke in the pale, pre-dressed Svetnam light, the chanting silenced. My gaze fell upon the black bag slumped in the corner. Was that a flicker of movement within, a shifting, as if the canvas stirred? I didn't investigate. A profound nausea rose within me, my eyes stinging with sudden hot tears. My chest felt impossibly tight. Breathe, Arthur, just breathe. Drastic action was needed. I forced myself through the motions, dressing, preparing. Then hoisting the bagged painting, I carried it towards the door. I waited, listening, ensuring the hallway was clear, avoiding neighborly eyes or questions. Inside the descending elevator, a faint whisper emanated from the bag beside me. My skin crawled, but I pressed onward. Outside, I drove, aimlessly at first, for 10 minutes, maybe more, my mind frantically seeking a suitable dumping ground, but logic warred with a deeper dread. What if throwing it in a dumpster, burying it, setting it adrift? What if none of it mattered? What if it possessed some terrible resilience, some homing instinct? The terrible conviction grew. Disposal was futile. Defeated, I turned the car around, heading back, the painting my unwanted passenger. Re-entering my apartment felt like crossing the threshold into a cage. Frustration and terror left my legs weak, my mouth filled with the bitter taste of anxiety. I deposited the bagged painting on the living room floor, stood there, breathing heavily. And then, my own voice, calm, resonant, spoke from the vicinity of the bag. "You're almost ready," it declared. Dizziness washed over me. I sank to my knees, staring at the black plastic shape. For long moments, I remained there, fists clenching and unclenching, anchoring myself with the rough texture of the carpet beneath my palms. Finally, rising unsteadily, I tore open the bag. The duct tape was ripped, shredded in places, as if breached from within. The painting's face, revealed now, fully formed, was mine. Not an approximation, not a resemblance. It was my face, staring back at me with an expression both alien and intimately known. Nausea surged, hot and acidic. My head throbbed with a dull, insistent pulse. Mechanically, I dragged the painting upright, leaning it against the wall. My hands were damp, slick with sweat. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic pulse in my ears. Thought itself felt sluggish, difficult. Glancing at a nearby framed photograph, I saw my reflection in the glass, pale, washed out. My eyes seemed to have lost their color, appearing dull, lifeless. Wiping perspiration from my brow, I fought for steady breaths. Am I still me? The question echoed in the sudden silence. I looked into the painted eyes. They seemed sharp, vibrant, unnervingly alive. Then I touched my own face, tracing the contours of my cheeks, my jaw. My skin felt cool, strangely distant. And so, here I remain. The painting leans against the wall, confronting me. I am staring at it even as I recount this. Its eyes are my eyes, identical in color and shape. The formal, old-fashioned suit it wears feels like a costume waiting for its actor. The stormy background persists, gray and melancholic. But now a subtle luminescence seems to emanate from around the face, as if the figure might detach itself from the canvas, step into the room. A profound weakness permeates my body, an aching exhaustion, as though something essential has been irrevocably drained. Gooseflesh rises and falls on my skin in waves. The whispers are silent for now, replaced by a low, persistent buzzing in my ears, like faint static on an open channel. Every few moments, I feel it, an invisible current pulling me towards the painting, the disorienting sensation of standing before a mirror that reflects more than just my image. Moving closer terrifies me. The fear is a raw, physical thing, tangling my thoughts. I cling to the notion of my identity, myself, with fierce desperation. Yet a chilling doubt persists. Has the transfer already occurred? Is that Arthur on the canvas? Or is this Arthur slowly becoming the painting? All I know for certain, trapped in this quiet room, is that I cannot look away. That is the unvarnished truth. A stuttering neon pulse painted the Moroccan dark. The gas station's sign a fractured heartbeat on the desolate highway, winding between Fes and Chefchaouen. Beside me, my brother Julian breathed the deep, even rhythm of sleep, oblivious, his head cushioned by the passenger window. Oblivious, too, that the fuel gauge needle trembled near empty. Our lifeline, the GPS, had surrendered to silence hours ago. The phone, a useless brick starved of signal since we'd strayed from the main artery. Gravel spat under the rental car's tires as I guided it towards the station's lonely island of light. It felt less like a business, more like a stage set abandoned mid-performance, save for the stark fluorescence washing over the counter inside. My schoolgirl French felt like sand slipping through fingers, my Arabic a meager collection of pleasantries. Shukran, fin al mirhad, suddenly, achingly insufficient. The dashboard glowed 1:47 a.m. I killed the engine. Silence rushed in, Julian didn't flinch. A minor tremor wouldn't stir him. A pale bandage circled his wrist, souvenir of an earlier miscalculation on the mountain passes. The reason for this nocturnal crawl, hours adrift from our intended arrival. Not broken, just strained, but a dull worry persisted. From the station's shadowed doorway, a man emerged, methodically wiping grease from his hands onto a crimson rag. His smile bloomed unexpectedly, a sudden lantern in the gloom, and a knot I hadn't realized I was holding loosened slightly. "Bonsoir, mademoiselle," he greeted, then slid into heavily accented English, the words carefully chosen. "You stray very far from the tourist path." I laid out our predicament, the technological betrayal, Julian's injury, the vanishing fuel. He listened, head tilted in sympathy, already unscrewing the gas cap. As the pump hummed, he spoke of a hospital in the next town. "My cousin, he works the night shift," he offered, gesturing vaguely down the road. "I can lead you. These roads, they play tricks in the dark." A subtle dissonance hummed beneath the helpful words. Why this intense focus on two misplaced travelers? While the fuel gurgled into the tank, I leaned over, pretending to rouse Julian, my whisper urgent against his ear. "Stay sharp." His eyelids fluttered, then opened, instantly registering the tension coiled in my posture. That's when the sound reached me. The man turned slightly away, murmuring rapid-fire Arabic into a walkie-talkie. The friendly mask had slipped, my fragmented understanding snagged on isolated words. Ithnain, 2. Wahiduhuma, alone. Something about Al-Tariq Al-Qadim, the old road. A burst of static-laced response crackled back, followed by the man's low chuckle. Julian pushed himself upright, his gaze now flinty. The attendant turned back, the smile replastered. "You will follow my car," he instructed smoothly. "Hospital, maybe 15 minutes, and the fuel. No charge. Think of it as my welcome gift to Morocco. Free gasoline. Here, now. A personal escort via a hidden route. An unnervingly convenient cousin at the destination." Alarm bells clamored in my skull. "Actually," I began, my hand moving towards my purse, forcing casualness. "I think a hotel might be better first. Julian's wrist isn't critical. It can wait for daylight." I fumbled with dirhams, deliberately pulling out more than necessary. He waved the money away, insistent. "Finding hotels now. Difficult. Please, allow me. The old road saves much time, much faster than the highway." Behind his shoulder, peripheral movement snagged my attention. Indistinct shapes stirring in the deep black between hulking parked trucks I hadn't consciously registered. Julian's hand found mine, a single, firm squeeze. Our childhood code. Danger. Run. The engine caught with a reassuring rumble. I kept my voice level. "Thank you, truly, but we'll stick to the highway. Safer." The transformation was instant. Friendliness evaporated like mist, leaving something hard and assessing in his eyes. He lifted the walkie-talkie again, speaking curtly. Around us, unseen engines rumbled to life, the low growl vibrating through the car floor. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slammed the gear shift into drive. Just then, twin beams sliced through the darkness from down the highway. Headlights, rapidly approaching. The familiar logo of a major hotel chain blazed on the side of an incoming tourist bus. The attendant's expression flickered, uncertainty replacing command. He stepped back from our car. The surrounding engines fell silent. I didn't linger. Flooring the accelerator, we surged onto the highway scant moments before the bus lumbered into the station, its doors hissing open, disgorging sleepy passengers into the harsh, fluorescent glare. In the rearview mirror, the gas station shrank, swallowed by the immense Moroccan night. 2 hours later, the bright, impersonal lobby of a Chef Chauvin hotel felt like sanctuary. We recounted the incident to the night manager, who marked the Sinister station's location on a map with a grim nod. We weren't the first, apparently, to find something unsettling lurking there. The following day brought context. We discovered a network of designated safe havens along popular routes, monitored stops, emergency contacts, staff trained to assist travelers. Authorities, it turned out, were actively working to weave a tighter net of security across the more remote stretches. At the hospital, while a doctor examined Julian's now properly assessed wrist, we met Anya, an American expatriate navigating the system as a patient liaison. She offered practical advice, shared anecdotes of her own integration, of learning the landscape's nuances. The trick, Anya advised, her gaze steady, is trusting your gut, but questioning your assumptions. Genuine kindness exists everywhere, often from strangers, but learn the texture of manipulation versus help. Know the difference. Our remaining journey unfolded under a new awareness. We charted safe stops, kept devices charged, carried emergency numbers. We encountered overwhelming generosity from locals who embodied the warmth Morocco is famed for. Their actions a crucial counterpoint, proving one shadow couldn't eclipse the country's light. Back home, the memory coalesced into action. I launched a travel blog focusing on safety for women exploring independently. Others chimed in, sharing their own near misses, their hard-won wisdom. A digital community formed, weaving together resources, fostering preparedness. News eventually filtered back. Emergency call boxes installed on isolated roads near that region. Local businesses embracing a safety certification, displaying stickers like small badges of trust. Travelers forming informal networks, sharing locations, looking out for one another. Last month, an email arrived from a young woman poised for her own Moroccan adventure. My story wasn't a deterrent I shared, but a lesson. Map your route, know your resources, listen to that inner tremor of warning, and remember that genuine goodwill is the norm, not the exception. That night taught me not that the world is inherently perilous, but that preparedness is empowering. Darkness exists, yes, in pockets everywhere, but so do countless hands working to illuminate the way, smoothing the path for those who follow. Now, I travel equipped not just with maps and chargers, but with the weight of experience, a reminder that vigilance and wonder can and must walk the same road. The position materialized on a Wednesday afternoon, an unexpected offer delivered with brisk finality. Mr. Abernathy, the manager, a man whose eyes held the weary resignation of old furniture, declared their need for a nocturnal guardian immediate. Its compensation eclipsed my previous earnings, a lure potent enough that I affixed my signature to the requisite forms with minimal inquiry. The structure he'd mentioned was venerable, largely deserted come nightfall. A faint tremor, like ice water tracing a vein, accompanied his remark about the place possessing certain idiosyncrasies. I suppressed it. Financial stability was paramount. Details remained unsolicited by me, unoffered by him. My inaugural shift commenced under the shroud of midnight. The building squatted on a somber street, starved of illumination save for a scattering of hesitant streetlights. Neighboring windows stared blackly, like vacant sockets. Above the entrance, a lone bulb cast a jaundiced luminescence, painting my own skin a sickly hue as I passed beneath. Inside, I authenticated my arrival via a small, indifferent digital panel near the threshold, then navigated according to Abernathy's terse directions toward the security hub. The corridor yawned dimly, my footfalls generating sharp, solitary echoes that ricocheted off the unseen surfaces. It conjured images of celluloid vacancies, yet this void carried the scent of ossified paper and frigid dust. Deep within the building's labyrinthine gut, I located the designated room, a constricted cell furnished with a solitary desk, a bank of archaic monitors displaying snowy indifference, and a binder thick with directives. Leafing through its pages revealed floor plans and specific chambers, demanding scrutiny. 4 stories constituted the edifice, yet the binder alleged only a sparse collective of tenants utilized portions for storage. My duties seemed elementary: patrol each level, verify illumination status, confirm door security, return, record. Simple. I scanned the notations for exceptional conditions. A single directive snagged my attention. Room 304. Ensure locked status perpetually when not in active use. Its meaning remained opaque, yet I gave it little immediate thought. Completing the initial circuit, I retreated to the security alcove, meticulously logging the timestamps. By 2 in the morning, boredom had begun to fray my composure, mingling with an undercurrent of disquiet. The hallways possessed a peculiar resonant quality. Every rustle of my attire, every minute shift in weight, seemed amplified into significance. I drifted past offices crammed with skeletal filing cabinets and shelves barren as bone. Ascending to the 3rd floor, the overhead fluorescent tubes greeted my emergence from the stairwell with a neurotic flicker. To my left, near the corridor's terminus, resided the door to room 304. I advanced towards it. It remained closed, precisely as I had left it. A confirmatory twist of the handle affirmed its locked state. Secure. The placard affixed to it read, "Typing Pool," an anachronism that struck me as curious, particularly since the binder merely designated it Room 304, offering no hint of typewriters. A mental shrug and I proceeded onward. Upon finishing the remainder of the 3rd floor inspection, I retraced my steps. It was then that a sound arrested my movement, the delicate, almost subliminal tapping of keys. Not the plastic clatter indigenous to contemporary keyboards. No. This possessed a metallic timbre, sharp and distinct. Pressing my ear flush against the cool wood of the door, I listened intently. Deliberate, rhythmic clicking resonated, the sound of focused transcription. A brief cessation, then the unmistakable zit-scrape of a page being advanced within a roller. a noise unique to the mechanics of a typewriter. A rigidity seized my muscles. Occupancy was forbidden. I tested the handle once more. It held fast. The sound emanated definitively from within, yet ceased the instant my hand disturbed the knob. My instinct urged contact with Abernathy, but hesitation intervened. He'd instructed reporting anomalies, yet the notion of summoning him over an errand noise felt absurdly premature. Perhaps residual mechanics within the ancient walls, I reasoned. Buildings groan, settle, emit phantom sounds. I consciously relinquished the mystery for the moment and resumed my patrol. Back in the sterile confines of the security room, I settled at the desk, the strange auditory sequence replaying itself within my mind's echo chamber. A creeping tension coiled in my neck, not painful, but a subtle, persistent stiffness, signaling discordance. I compelled myself to delve deeper into the binder's contents, hunting for any mention of antiquated machinery on the third level. Nothing materialized. My gaze drifted to the aged monitors. They offered only grainy, static vistas of corridors in the main entrance, devoid of irregularity. Eventually, I persuaded myself the sound had been a figment, a trick of silence and solitude. The second night found me imbued with heightened alertness, a hunter seeking the return of elusive prey. My initial patrol near midnight unfolded in profound silence until the ascent to the third floor. This time I stood sentinel before room 304 for a protracted minute. Stillness reigned. I moved on. Scarcely 10 minutes later, traversing the same passage on my return leg, it recurred. Click, click, click. Then the familiar drag of paper against platen. A leaden weight sank in my stomach. The identical acoustic signature. Retrieving my keys, I engaged the lock, pushed the door inward, and activated the overhead light. The chamber was expansive, populated by rows of old wooden tables. Upon each rested a typewriter. Some bore wounds, missing keys, cracked casings. Others appeared relatively intact. All wore a uniform shroud of fine dust. The air hung thick with a musty, stale perfume of forgotten paper and time. No movement stirred. The machines stood inert, platens empty. I circumnavigated the room, seeking any trace of recent activity. Then, my eye caught it. A solitary sheet of paper lying askew on one table. The text inscribed upon it consisted of short, fragmented lines, composed in a script utterly alien to me. The characters were rough-hewn, a bizarre fusion of sharp angles and unsettling curves. A chill traversed the skin of my arms. Tentatively, I prodded the page with a fingertip. Real paper. Tangible. I folded it carefully, tucking it into my pocket. One final sweeping glance around the silent room. Then I secured the lock and descended. In the security room's stark illumination, I held the paper beneath the desk lamp. The words remained stubbornly unintelligible. It wasn't merely an unfamiliar foreign tongue. French, perhaps, or Spanish. It felt archaic, possibly cryptographic. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scrutinized the bizarre glyphs. Suddenly, a soft creak emanated from the hallway beyond. A footstep. I froze. The door stood slightly ajar. Peering through the gap revealed only emptiness. Old floorboards settling, I told myself, forcing the explanation. I deposited the strange page into my bag, retrieved my phone, and contemplated calling Abernathy. Yet the lateness of the hour, coupled with the sheer strangeness of the discovery. Found a cryptic note in a locked room. sir, sounded like nascent madness. I resolved to wait for morning. Dawn arrived, and I exited the building with undue haste. The day was consumed by contemplation of the previous night's events. A desire to share the enigmatic page warred with the fear of disbelief, of being labeled delusional. I nearly convinced myself it was merely a relic, some forgotten document from decades past, perhaps utilizing a specialized code from the typing pool's heyday. Yet, a deeper intuition rejected this comforting rationale. The third night, I approached the building suffused with a palpable sense of dread. The prospect of another encounter with the typewriters held no appeal. I executed my rounds with forced rapidity. Around 1 o'clock, the sound returned, but amplified, louder this time. The repetitive clacking possessed a clearer, more insistent quality. I sprinted towards room 304, fumbled with the lock, and burst inside. Instantly, the sound evaporated. But now, on each table, lay a sheet of paper. I snatched the nearest one. The same peculiar script stared back, each line meticulously spaced, resembling some precise, cryptic inventory. Moving to the adjacent table yielded another page. Identical script, different arrangement. A prickling sensation crawled across the back of my neck, the unmistakable feeling of observation. My head snapped around. The room remained vacant. Yet, the feeling persisted. It was then I heard it, a soft exhalation, impossibly close beside my ear. I spun, finding nothing but empty air. Panic surged, a cold wave. My heart pounded violently. Gathering as many pages as my trembling hands could manage, I scrambled from the room, slammed the door, and secured the lock. I stood in the hallway, gasping for breath, clutching the papers to my chest. Retreating to the security room, I flung the collected sheets onto the desk and began to pace before the impassive monitors. A faint scraping sound whispered from behind me, like a hesitant foot dragging across the floor. I whirled. The door was shut tight. The fine hairs on my arms erected themselves. Sinking into the chair, I forced slow, deliberate breaths. The pages lay scattered, mocking me with their incomprehensible text. Questions swirled. An intruder. Spontaneous generation. The impossibility pressed down. Subsequent nights adhered to the established, unnerving pattern. The rhythmic typing would inevitably commence on the third floor. Opening the door would reveal silence, freshly materialized pages, and that persistent, phantom presence trailing just behind my perception. I searched meticulously for hidden apertures, concealed cameras, ventilation shafts large enough for passage. The walls, floor, ceiling, all appeared solid, inviolate. Nothing offered a rational explanation for the sounds, the pages. By the fifth night, I ceased collecting the documents. Their proliferation had become overwhelming, sometimes 3 or 4, other nights a dozen or more, all bearing those disturbing symbols. I felt like a specimen in some unseen experiment, trapped in a cycle without exit. My sleep disintegrated. Daylight hours were spent in my apartment, staring blankly at the accumulated pages, launching futile internet searches for any analogous script. Nothing surfaced. It wasn't any known alphabet, extant or extinct, that I could identify. Defeated, I abandoned the quest after countless fruitless hours. At work, paranoia became my constant companion. Compulsive glances over my shoulder punctuated my patrols. Ephemeral whispers of breath, Faint shuffling noises seemed to emanate from deserted corridors. I'd whip around corners, expecting confrontation, only to find vacant space. By the second week, the thought of resignation became a persistent hum beneath my anxiety. Yet, the remuneration held its allure, and the prospect of articulating the situation to anyone felt insurmountable. I attempted to broach the subject with Abernathy one afternoon, vaguely mentioning odd nocturnal sounds, inquiring about dormant machinery. He offered a look of mild puzzlement, a dismissive shrug. The building had history, he conceded non-committally, but evinced no genuine concern. That night, the ambient tension thickened, becoming almost palpable. Around 2 a.m., ensconced in the security room, I was idly reviewing the binder once more, when a sudden, urgent rattling erupted from the hallway, the distinct sound of a door handle being violently shaken. I leaped to my feet, pulse thundering. Flinging open the door revealed an empty corridor. Cautiously, I moved towards the stairwell, testing each office door en route. All remained securely locked. Then, the typing resumed, echoing through the passage, but this time imbued with a frantic, desperate energy. A powerful reluctance warred within me. Entering room 304 felt profoundly unwise. Yet, an inexplicable magnetic pull drew me forward. Each step down the hall felt weighted. Reaching the door, I paused, listening to the chaotic cascade of metallic impacts. My mouth was parchment dry. Slipping the key into the lock, I turned it, pushed the door open, and hit the light switch. The typing ceased abruptly, mid-clack. Before me, every single typewriter held a sheet of paper in its roller. Keys stood poised, arrested in mid-strike. My legs threatened to buckle. The machines sat in profound, waiting silence. I took a hesitant step forward. A short, guttural breath rasped near my right ear. I spun. Nothing. Raw panic flooded my system. My skin felt clammy, my shirt adhering unpleasantly to my back. Flight screamed through my nerves, but my limbs remained locked in place. Forcing movement, I inspected the tables. Pages saturated with the alien script. Yes, but several now bore large, irregular splotches of ink. They looked unnervingly fresh, glistening wetly under the fluorescent glare. I extended a finger towards one blotch. It felt cold, viscous. I recoiled, revulsion churning. Scanning the room again, uncertain, the air felt charged, heavy with unspoken imminence. My skin tingled. Turning to depart, the faintest scrape of a single typewriter key sounded behind me. I bolted into the hallway, slammed the door, twisted the lock. I stood there panting, pressing my forehead against the cool, unyielding wall. The remainder of the night was spent cloistered in the security room. Attempts at distraction via old logbooks proved futile. Entries from previous guards were conspicuously mundane, devoid of any mention of similar phenomena. Had they experienced nothing, or simply chosen silence? Time became molasses. My gaze perpetually sought the clock, counting down the minutes until dawn. Every trivial sound provoked a startle reflex. The walls felt constrictive, closing in. A metallic tang lingered in my mouth. My shoulders were rigid knots of tension. By sunrise, I was frayed, exhausted. I deactivated the monitors, gathered my belongings, and departed, neglecting even the formality of logging my final, non-existent round. I remain employed there. More nights have elapsed, adhering to the same spectral routine. Sometimes, silence reigns, and the anticipation of the typewriter's awakening becomes its own form of torture. Other nights, more pages materialize, bearing their cryptic cargo. The presence endures, that faint susurrus of breath, the subtle shuffle just beyond sight. Never more than fleeting glimpses of the peripheral, yet sufficient to keep my nerves perpetually frayed. I've confided in no one. Resignation remains a tempting, yet ungrasped option. Daily, in the privacy of my apartment, I confront the growing stack of pages, their meaning perpetually elusive. They feel intrinsically wrong in my hands, imbued with messages not intended for human comprehension. The sensation of being watched persists, a constant invisible pressure that permeates not just room 304, but every shadowed corner of the edifice. Occasionally, I scrutinize the grainy monitor feeds, hoping for a flicker, a shadow, some visual confirmation of the unseen occupant. Nothing ever appears. Only dust motes dancing in empty hallways and the stuttering pulse of failing lights. Yet the typing continues its sporadic performance, and the pages continue their silent accumulation. When I attempt to decipher them, I feel it, that cold exhalation near my ear, a silent admonition against prying too deeply. My heart still pounds with each contact, yet I find myself compelled to gather them. Is any of this tangible, or am I unraveling within the building's oppressive silence? The pages piling up in my closet stand as stark, physical testament. Something transpires within that room. I lack the will to destroy them, and possess no power to halt their genesis. Night after night, I trace my prescribed path, test the locks, and await the familiar metallic serenade. Part of me yearns for cessation, for peace. Another, darker part feels inextricably bound to it, needing to witness its culmination. For now, I return, listening to the clicks and the carriage returns, waiting for a face to finally coalesce from the shadows behind me. It never does. Yet, I sense it there, breathing, watching, and leaving words I will never understand. Some familiarities curdle. A road traced 1,000 times can suddenly twist underfoot, the known landscape warping into something alien, unsettling. That night, the world tilted just so, a barely perceptible shift, yet enough to sow the first insidious seeds of dread deep within Leo's gut. He'd departed Alara's after a lingering meal, opting for the ribbon of asphalt that wound through the old timberlands toward home. A route ingrained in muscle memory, usually a balm of solitude, the trees arching overhead like cathedral vaults, the tires whispering secrets on the loose stone. Comfort habitually found there. But past 11, the familiar turned menacing. The darkness wasn't mere absence of light. It felt thick, viscous. His headlamps clawed feebly at the encroaching void, illuminating scant yards ahead. Sentinel pines pressed closer on either side, their silence profound, watchful. No moon pierced the cloud-choked sky. The expected constellation of porch lights and mailbox reflectors along the route vanished. An hour dissolved without the flicker of opposing headlights, a rare but not impossible occurrence, made suddenly sinister by the atmosphere. Silence reigned, absolute, until Leo sought refuge in the radio, only to be met by a furious hiss of empty airwaves. A glance at the phone resting inert on the passenger seat confirmed the isolation. No bars, a dead screen staring blankly back. Then, the impossible. A curve. Not the gentle sweep miles ahead, the one etched into his memory. but a sudden, violent wrench in the road's linearity, sharp and unnatural. His heart lurched against his ribs. Instinct wrenched the wheel, tires spitting gravel as the headlights swung wildly, illuminating more of the narrowed passage. White knuckles clamped the leather. This aberration, this geographical lie, how had it remained hidden on countless previous journeys? Easing off the accelerator, grappling with the disorientation, a faint glimmer punctured the gloom ahead. Hope, fragile but present. A homestead, a forgotten hamlet. But drawing closer, the light resolved not into the steady glow of electricity, but the unsteady pulse of flame. Flickering, hesitant, emanating from a structure slumped by the roadside. A gas station, derelict, a relic swallowed by time. Rust gnawed its sign into illegibility. The pumps stood like skeletal sentinels, long dry. Yet within its grimy windows, this impossible oasis pulsed with the soft, erratic light of candles or oil lamps. A tremor ran down Leo's spine. He pressed on, crawling past the structure, the fine hairs on his nape prickling. Who would haunt such a ruin, tending phantom flames in this god-forsaken nowhere? The urge to stop warred with a primal need to flee. He accelerated, the image burning behind his eyes. It couldn't be. This road, his road, held no such landmark, never had. Yet the vision lingered, stark against the oppressive dark, undeniably real. Distance offered no solace. The asphalt beneath felt wrong. The trees leaned at impossible angles. Had he slipped through a seam in reality, onto a phantom track mirroring his own? His pulse hammered a frantic rhythm against his ears. The phone remained inert, a useless brick. And then, impossible, the flickering lights reappeared ahead. The same rusted sign, the same skeletal pumps, the same candlelit windows squatting patiently by the roadside. Brakes screamed, tires bit gravel. No, he hadn't reversed, hadn't deviated. Yet here it stood again, an inescapable fixture in this warped geography. Paralysis held him for a long moment, engine idling, headlights carving the decrepit scene from the darkness. The candle flames within performed a silent, hypnotic ballet. Against all reason, against the screaming instinct to floor the accelerator, a morbid compulsion took hold. Curiosity, terror demanding confrontation. He killed the engine, plunging the immediate vicinity into deeper shadow save for the eerie glow from the station. Stepping out, the air bit, colder than seemed possible. The silence absolute save for the grit complaining under his boots. Each step toward the grimy door felt weighted, dragging him toward an answer he suspected he wouldn't want. Hesitating at the threshold, he peered through a smear on the glass. Dust motes danced in the wavering candlelight. The small space choked on clutter, shelves sagging with ghost-pale cans, faded advertisements peeling from the walls. The light, frail and yellow, bled from several thick candles placed seemingly at random, throwing distorted shadows that writhed like living things. Behind the counter, silhouetted against the uncertain glow, stood a figure. A woman, her back to him, utterly still. A cascade of dark hair obscured her nape, unmoving in the stagnant air. Her stillness wasn't calm. It was absolute, unnatural, a knot tightening in Leo's gut. His knuckles rapped against the glass. Silence answered. Louder. Nothing. She remained fixed, a sculpture carved from shadow. Possessed by a terrible momentum, his hand found the cold metal handle. It turned. A tiny bell overhead gave a startled, tinny jingle, swallowed instantly by the oppressive quiet. The air inside hung thick with the scent of decay, and something else, something cloying and ancient. "Hello?" His voice cracked, a frail thing in the heavy space. "Are you all right?" No reply. Not a twitch. Closer now, the floorboards groaning under his weight. "Miss?" The silence pressed in. One more step, and then he saw. Below the hem of her unseen garment, a sliver of impossible space. Her feet. They weren't on the floor. She hung suspended, mere inches above the dusty planks, utterly inert, yet strands of her hair lifted and fell as if stirred by some unfelt current. Ice flooded his veins. Every synapse screamed, "Wrong!" Logic fractured against the impossible sight. His breath hitched. As he instinctively recoiled, a faint creak echoed from behind him. The door, swinging inward again, the bell uttering another thin, mocking jingle. No thought, only blind panic. He scrambled backward, tripping, catching himself, then launched himself through the doorway into the cold night. Fumbling, shaking hands wrestled the car key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, a defiant sound in the dead quiet. Slamming the door, thumbing the lock, a futile gesture. He threw the car into gear and fled, tires spitting gravel, refusing the urge to glance in the rearview mirror, terrified of what might be reflected there. He drove without conscious thought, propelled by sheer terror, until the distant, comforting glow of his town bloomed on the horizon. Only then, as the road widened and the suffocating press of the woods receded, did the knot in his chest begin to loosen. Rolling into his own driveway felt like breaching the surface after near drowning. Hands still vibrating, he sat in the sudden stillness, the engine ticking cool, staring at the mundane safety of his street. What abyss had he skirted? How had that road, that station, ensnared him in its impossible loop? The answers remain elusive, lost in the oppressive dark of that night. But this Leo knows with chilling certainty. That particular thread of asphalt is forever severed from his map. And should you ever find yourself on a path where the familiar sours, where the silence screams too loudly, trust that feeling. Turn back. Some journeys lead only to places from which there is no easy return. The weight of the Thursday dissolved slowly as Elias drove towards Havenwood Ridge. This hamlet nestled deep in Oregon's folds, bought sight unseen for its promise of quietude. He'd sought an antidote to the city's relentless thrum, finding it perhaps too well in the small, two-story clapboard house that stood sentinel at the town's frayed edge. No kindred lights winked from nearby windows. Only dense stands of fir and a vacant sweep of field offered company. Inside, the air hung still, precisely as he'd left it that morning. A profound silence settled as he shed his shoes, let his satchel slump near the threshold, and drifted towards the kitchen, weary bones yearning for oblivion. Yet, standing before the open refrigerator, its cool breath on his face, a dissonance prickled the air. Something felt displaced. He dismissed it. Fatigue playing tricks, surely. A hastily assembled sandwich, a glass of water, the worn kitchen table. But the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was expectant, amplifying the refrigerator's low hum, the deliberate tick of the wall clock, until another sound surfaced, faint as a memory. Footfalls. Upstairs. Elias froze, the sandwich halfway to his mouth. Listening intently, the sound seemed to dissolve, an echo swallowed by the house's stillness. Wind through an unsecured latch, a plausible culprit. He rose, a tremor starting deep within, his heart quickening its beat against his ribs. He moved with deliberate slowness towards the staircase, ears straining against the silence. The steps had ceased, yet the unsettling conviction lingered. He was not alone. Absurd, he chided himself, taking a breath. Old timbers groan, settle. But as his gaze traveled up the shadowed stairwell, the icy tingle returned, a phantom touch on his nape. Each riser creaked its lament under his weight as he ascended, eyes probing the dim hallway ahead, half braced for a confrontation. Nothing. Only elongated shadows cast by the weak overhead bulb, painting the passage in shades of gray. He methodically cleared each room, the stark bathroom tile, the spare chamber holding only dust motes dancing in slivered light, and finally, his own bedroom. All vacant, windows sealed tight, doors secured. A ragged sigh escaped him, relief tinged with foolishness. The profound quietude of Havenwood Ridge was simply getting under his skin. Retreating downstairs, he summoned the television's artificial chatter, a flimsy bulwark against the disquiet that refused to fully recede. Paranoia, he insisted. The strangeness of the new, the unfamiliar cadence of solitude. Later, cocooned in bedclothes, the unease coiled persistently. He traced patterns on the darkened ceiling, cataloging every nocturnal sigh and groan of the old house, until sleep finally claimed him. It was in that deep, starless pocket of the night that he jolted awake, unsure of the catalyst. The room was a void, utterly silent. He lay suspended in the darkness, wooing sleep's return. But then it came again, the whisper of footsteps, no longer faint, no longer distant. They were just beyond his bedroom door. His pulse leaped, a frantic bird against his ribs. He sat bolt upright, breath held captive, listening. The tread was unhurried, measured, a slow pacing back and forth in the hallway's narrow confines. Trembling fingers fumbled for the phone on the nightstand, its screen casting a stark white glare before resolving into a flashlight beam. He slipped from bed, bare feet whispering on the cool floorboards, and crept towards the door. Holding the light low, a trembling spear against the dark, he eased the door open, sliver by careful sliver. The corridor stretched before him, starkly empty. He swept the beam left, right, nothing but familiar shadows, inanimate and still, no trace. Hesitantly, he stepped out, the light probing the corners, every nerve alight, a tightly wound spring. Another sweep of the upstairs rooms yielded only hollow confirmation. The house was empty, silent as a tomb. He retreated to bed, mind racing, desperately constructing rationalizations that crumbled even as he formed them. Sleep remained elusive. The hours stretched, marked only by the house's murmurs and his own strained listening. The following day was an exercise in determined normalcy. Work provided distraction, a temporary reprieve where he could label the night's events as overtired nerves, the jitters of settling in. But returning home as dusk bled across the sky, the familiar apprehension settled over him like a shroud. The house felt watchful. He moved through his evening rituals, attempting a casual disregard, yet every passage by a window sent a jolt through him, an imagined pressure of eyes observing from the deepening gloom outside. He'd jerk his head towards the glass, finding only the familiar tableau. The empty yard, the stark silhouette of the tree line against the fading light. Later, preparing for bed, a flicker of movement snagged his peripheral vision, a deeper shadow detaching itself from the others near the window. He turned, heart slamming against his sternum, and saw him. A man, positioned just outside the weak circumference of the porch light, gazing upwards. Tall, indistinct in the darkness, save for the impression of dark hair, and a face utterly devoid of expression. He was looking directly at the window, directly at Elias. A paralysis seized him, thoughts scattering like startled birds. Call the authorities. But the impulse warred with an inexplicable need to keep the figure in sight. He watched, breath caught high in his chest, waiting for a gesture, a word, any sign of intent. The man remained unnervingly still, a sentinel carved from night, his silence absolute. Elias took an involuntary step back, hand scrabbling blindly for his phone on the dresser. When his gaze snapped back to the window, the man was gone. The yard lay empty beneath the indifferent moon, only the wind stirring the branches at the field's edge. He made the call, his voice tight, recounting the sighting. The responding officers were polite, their search of the property thorough, but fruitless. No footprints marred the damp earth. No sign corroborated his story. A local youth playing a prank, perhaps, they suggested gently, their tone implying he was merely spooked by the isolation. But Elias knew the solid reality of the figure, the chilling weight of that vacant stare. He had been there, watching. The ensuing days were strung taut with anticipation. Each homecoming was fraught, his eyes scanning the yard before he even cut the engine. But the space remained stubbornly empty. Yet, the sensation persisted, a constant hum beneath the surface of his thoughts. The watcher was near, concealed just beyond the tree line, waiting. One evening, the drone of the television filling the living room, the sound returned. Footsteps. Not faint this time, but solid, insistent, echoing clearly from the floor above. Grabbing the heavy flashlight, pulse hammering a frantic rhythm, Elias mounted the stairs again, each step a conscious act of will against the urge to flee. At the landing, the beam sliced through the hallway's gloom. Empty rooms yawned back at him. Then, a new sound, delicate yet unnerving, a soft tapping, emanating from his bedroom window. He pivoted, ice tracing a path down his spine, and moved slowly down the hall. The tapping persisted, rhythmic, almost gentle, a quiet summons. Reaching the bedroom doorway, he paused, drawing a ragged breath before his hand reached out, twitching the curtain aside. He was there, pressed close against the exterior pane, face mere inches from the glass. His eyes, wide and unblinking, locked onto Elias's. A pale, expressionless mask in the darkness, devoid of any discernible emotion or intent. Elias stumbled backward, a strangled gasp tearing from his throat, his mind struggling to reconcile the impossible proximity, the sheer physical presence of the watcher at his window. The figure didn't move, didn't react, simply stared, a terrifying tableau of silent intrusion. Reason shattered. Elias bolted, scrambling from the room, down the creaking stairs, fumbling with the front door lock. He burst into the cool night air, and didn't stop running until he reached his car, hands shaken so violently he could barely guide the key into the ignition. The engine caught, roared to life, and he threw the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel, driving blindly away from the house, away from the face at the window. Destination irrelevant. Escape the only imperative. He found refuge in the sterile anonymity of a roadside motel, spending the night staring at the textured ceiling, jolting at every unfamiliar noise from the hallway or the parking lot. Days passed before he could muster the courage to return. The house, when he finally re-entered it, was just as he'd fled it, silent, empty. But the feeling, the oppressive certainty of being observed, had become imprinted on the very air within its walls. It lingered, a permanent resident. He didn't know who the man was or what desolate purpose drove him. But every night now, Elias draws the curtains tight, meticulously checks the locks, and waits in the charged silence, burdened by the chilling conviction that someday the Watcher will return. Dawn's first tentative fingers pried open the gloom beneath the canopy, illuminating the violent tableau of my violated sanctuary. Shards of eerie light slanted across the wreckage. My canvas shelter hung in obscene tatters, provisions strewn like entrails. A tremor coursed through me, unrelated to the cool morning air. The truth coiled in my gut, cold and heavy. Solitude was a phantom limb. Unseen eyes had dissected my slumber all night long. Months I'd plotted this immersion, this flight from the city's clamorous insistence. Gloomfang Forest, they called it. A place whispered about for its untamed heart, its demanding embrace. As Elias, a seasoned wanderer, I believed myself armored against nature's caprices. Arrogance I see now. Pure arrogance. 2 suns had wheeled overhead in serene procession. I'd pushed deep, leaving the faintest trails far behind, intoxicated by the profound quietude, the raw, untainted loveliness. The third dusk found me nestled in perfection, a diminutive clearing beside a stream whose murmurings promised peace, ringed by sentinel pines. Sleep had claimed me easily then, a velvet curtain drawn by the forest's gentle sighs. Now, standing amidst the desecration, that tranquility felt like a story told in another lifetime. My fingers trembled as they closed around the remnants of my pack. No mere animal wrought this chaos. The ruined felt considered malevolent. Claw marks, yes, gouged the tent fabric, but alien in their aspect, too immense for any bear, too deliberately placed for mindless savagery. A shard of metallic light snagged my vision. I stooped, breath seizing, recognition a cold fist clenching in my chest, my hunting blade. Last night it rested safe in its sheath within the tent. Now it lay defiled in the loam, its steel weeping a dark, glutinous substance. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scanned the tree line, suddenly naked in the small openness. The woods, yesterday a haven, now felt suffocating, its shadows pregnant with nameless hostility. Escape. The imperative screamed through me, back to the known world, to walls and locks. But as I sought orientation, a dizzying panic bloomed. In my quest for the perfect hidden spot, I'd wandered far from any charted path. The direction of my arrival was lost, swallowed by the trees. A twig cracked sharp and close, somewhere beyond my shoulder. I spun, the knife a desperate extension of my white-knuckled fist. Nothing. Only more trees, more shifting chiaroscuro. yet the sensation intensified. A prickling certainty crawled up my spine. The focus of an unseen intelligence, watching, waiting. I salvaged what I could, jamming essentials into the violated pack. Meager rations, water purifier, the first aid kit, talismans against the encroaching unknown. While my hands worked, my mind scrabbled for coherence, for a rational strategy. Sunlight climbed, dissolving the lingering mist. Staying was unthinkable. The architect of this ruin might revisit its work, and I craved no introduction. Movement was survival, finding the lost thread of the trail, the only goal. I hefted the pack, its lightness a grim reminder of my losses. The knife's weight offered scant comfort. I knew its inadequacy against the unseen dread, should it choose confrontation. Choosing a direction based on a vague, sun-dappled memory, I began to walk. The forest pulsed with morning life. Avian calls, the scurry of small bodies in the undergrowth. But beneath this surface hum lay a dissonant chord, a fundamental wrongness that set my nerves vibrating. Hours bled away. I pushed through an endless tapestry of trees, each clearing a disorienting echo of the last. I tried navigating by the sun, keeping it to my left, praying it would guide me eastward, back toward the trailhead's promise. Yet, as the day arched towards its zenith and the woods refused to yield, doubt gnawed relentlessly. Mid-afternoon brought it, a sound alien to this wilderness, a low, guttural growl that resonated from the very air around me, seeming to emanate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. I froze, my blood thickening to slush. The growl repeated, nearer. Something substantial moved parallel to my path, veiled by the dense foliage. I glimpsed fragments, a ripple of dark, coarse fur, the fleeting shine of eyes observing from the umbra. Panic detonated within me. Reason fled. I bolted, crashing through bracken and briar, directionless, heedless of stealth. Branches lashed my face, roots clawed at my ankles, yet I surged onward. The sounds of pursuit, a heavy, rhythmic crashing through the woods, became a terrifying engine driving me forward. Time dissolved in the frantic, verdant blur. My lungs burned, muscles screamed, but the primal urge to flee overpowered all else. Suddenly, I erupted into a small glade, momentum carrying me too far. The ground simply ceased. A precipitous ravine yawned before me, breathing cold air upwards. I skidded to a halt mere inches from the lip, arms flailing, dislodging stones and soil that tumbled into the shadowed depths. The growl sounded again, directly behind me. Slowly, agonizingly, I turned, the knife held trembling before me. It stood at the clearing's edge, a silhouette coalesced from nightmare, vast and wrong. Its form defied neat taxonomy, larger than Ursine, limbs knotted with impossible strength, cloaked in shadow-dark fur. But the eyes held me captive, twin embers lit with a terrifying sentience, a hunger ancient and disturbingly familiar. An eternity condensed into the space between heartbeats as we regarded each other. My mind fractured, trying to reconcile the impossible thing before me with reality. Such creatures belong to myth, to fever dreams. Yet it was undeniably present, its terrible, knowing gaze dissecting me. It shifted, a deliberate movement forward. options evaporated. The chasm behind promised oblivion. Facing this monstrosity felt equally fatal. In that sliver of indecision, it lunged. Instinct screamed. I hurled myself aside as it swept past. Its own impetus betrayed it. Claws scrabbled desperately at the crumbling edge, seeking purchase that wasn't there. With a guttural shriek that tore the air, a sound blending fury and terror, it plunged into the abyss. I lay sprawled, gulping air, disbelief warring with adrenaline. The woods held their breath. Silence descended, broken only by my own ragged gasps. Tentatively, inch by agonizing inch, I crawled to the ravine's edge and peered down. Nothing. No broken form. No sign of impact. Only mist writhed in the chasm's gullet, swirling like disturbed spirits. I scrambled back, mind reeling. What had I witnessed? What was that entity? And chillingly, were there others? The sun bled across the western sky, painting clouds in fiery oranges and bruised purples. Darkness was coming, and with it, amplified terrors. Remaining here was madness. I had to move. I chose a direction, any direction, and walked. The earlier panic had cauterized into a grim, unyielding resolve. I would endure. I would find my way out of this cursed forest. Night fell, thick and absolute. Moonlight painted treacherous paths, casting shadows that writhed with potential menace at the periphery of my vision. Every snap of a twig jolted me. Every rustle set my heart hammering. But I did not stop. Near midnight, a distant luminescence pricked the oppressive dark. A trick of weary eyes. A hallucination born of fear. Closer, hope surged, fragile but fierce. A light, an artificial, electric glow. I broke into a shambling run, heedless of the noise. Trees thinned, dissolved, and abruptly, I stumbled free of the Gloomfang's grasp, onto the margin of a small, sleeping town. The light emanated from a fuel station, its fluorescent benediction, the most sublime sight I had ever beheld. As I lurched toward its promise, the ordeal's true weight crashed down. My legs buckled. I collapsed onto the cool pavement. The last image seared into my consciousness before darkness claimed me was the wide-eyed face of the attendant rushing towards me. I surfaced in the sterile white of a hospital room, adrift in a sea of concerned medical faces and the sharp skepticism of uniformed officers. Questions rained down. Where had I truly been? What accounted for my state? What phantoms had my mind conjured in the woods? I recounted my tale, the raw, unbelievable truth, knowing its sound. They offered placating nods, murmurs of dehydration, exhaustion, perhaps hallucinogenic flora. The cuts and bruises, merely the price of a panicked flight through dense woods, they surmised. But I remember. I know what hunts in the deep places of Gloomfang Forest, and I know, with chilling certainty, that others will wander into its grasp. Others will confront the truth lurking just beyond the veil of our mundane world. As for Elias, my days of seeking solace in the wild are over. The wilderness sings no siren song for me now, yet sometimes on nights when the wind claws at the windows, my gaze drifts towards the distant, dark horizon of trees, and I wonder, with a cold knot in my stomach, if somewhere within that shadowed expanse, something gazes back. The sun hammered the asphalt into submission, the highway dissolving into shimmering illusions under its relentless glare. My car, my faithful, rust-pocked sedan, had exhaled its last mechanical sigh, stranding me in an ocean of shimmering heat and indifference. With a hopeful thumb thrust towards the vacant horizon, I prayed for passage, never dreaming the approaching vehicle would become the vessel carrying me toward a darkness from which escape seemed impossible. Days I'd driven, shedding miles and memories of a fractured love, chasing the promise of a Californian dawn. A fresh canvas awaited, or so the fantasy went. But destiny, it seemed, preferred detours. An ominous percussion began beneath the hood, a death rattle that grew louder until, with a final shudder and a plume of acrid smoke, the engine fell silent. An hour bled into the next under that unforgiving sky. Each passing minute stole more strength, thirst tightening its grip. Hope dwindled with the sun's slow descent, just as the grim prospect of a long trek back to the last forgotten town began to solidify. A low growl disturbed the silence. A polished black shape materialized from the heat haze, swelling into a substantial SUV. A surge, sharp and unexpected, jolted through me. Hope. It slowed, pulling alongside. Behind the wheel, a man, perhaps mid-40s, hair streaked with distinguished gray, eyes hidden behind dark lenses. The window purred down. Trouble. His voice was even, accompanied by a disarming smile. Relief washed through me, cool and potent. Yes, thank goodness. My car gave out a mile or so back. He offered a sympathetic nod. Climb aboard. I'm heading toward Ashton Creek. Name's Silas. Eliza, I managed, sliding into the passenger seat, gasping as refrigerated air enveloped me. As we eased back onto the highway, a pang struck me seeing my derelict car receding in the mirror. Silas proved conversational, inquiring about my travels, lamenting the fickle nature of older machines. His easy manner was a balm after the desolate hours, and I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to ease. Yet, as the landscape blurred past, subtle dissonances began to surface. The way Silas's knuckles bleached against the steering wheel when I mentioned needing to arrange a tow in Ashton Creek. The unnerving realization that an hour had passed, yet no signposts, no hint of civilization, broke the monotony of the roadside. Shouldn't we be nearing the town soon? I ventured, striving for nonchalance. The smile on Silas's lips seemed to thin, almost imperceptibly. It's tucked away a bit further than I recalled. No worries, nearly there. I nodded, a knot of cold dread tightening low in my belly. A furtive glance at my phone confirmed the void. No service. Naturally, we were adrift. The terrain outside had subtly shifted, the parched earth giving way to encroaching woodlands, dense and unfamiliar. Had we crossed a border unnoticed? My internal compass spun wildly. Actually, I began, my throat suddenly parched. Could we possibly pull over at the next service station? I'm feeling a bit unwell. His grip tightened visibly now. Afraid there's nothing like that for quite a stretch. Best to press on to our destination. Our destination, not Ashton Creek. The slip, though small, resonated like a slammed door, confirming the nascent terror. This man wasn't delivering me to safety. My thoughts scrambled, a frantic search for an escape route. Leaping was impossible. The speed was too great. The doors likely secured. I possessed no weapon, no means of defense beyond the frail shield of my wits, and the potential advantage of surprise. I forced a mask of calm, feigning normalcy. If he sensed my suspicion, the situation could devolve instantly. So I chattered, asking pointless questions about the region, my gaze sweeping the cabin, searching for leverage, an object, anything. Rounding a curve, a sliver of hope appeared, a narrow dirt track veering off into the trees. It was the only chance. "Oh, heavens, stop!" I shrieked, pointing wildly toward the side road. "I swear I just saw a deer bolt across there." His reaction was pure reflex. Brakes screamed. The SUV lurched to a halt. In that fractured moment of disorientation, I acted. My hand shot to the door handle, unlocked, and I threw myself out, hitting the packed earth with bruising force. Adrenaline surged, lifting me instantly. I scrambled onto the dirt track, ignoring the sting of branches slapping my face as I plunged into the shadowed embrace of the forest. Behind me, Silas's enraged shout, the solid thud of his car door closing. I ran as if pursued by demons, lungs searing, legs churning with desperate power. Looking back was a luxury I couldn't afford. The imagined horrors were fuel enough. The relentless sound of pursuit, crashing brush, snapping twigs, echoed my pounding heart, driving me deeper into the wilderness. Eventually, muscles screaming, breath ragged, I could run no more. My legs buckled, depositing me behind the girth of an ancient oak. I pressed my face against the rough bark, struggling to silence my gasping breaths, straining to hear over the frantic drumming in my ears. Faintly, then closer, the crunch of leaves under heavy boots. He was still coming. My eyes darted, frantic for refuge. A fallen log, immense and partially hollowed by decay, offered scant promise, but it was all there was. I wriggled inside, recoiling from the damp, fungal scent and the unsettling skitter of unseen insects across my skin. Through a crack in the rotting wood, I watched Silas's boots pass by, methodical, unhurried. A predator tracking its quarry, which I understood with chilling clarity was precisely his role. "Ready or not, here I come," he called out, the playful tone curdling my blood. "Can't hide forever, Eliza. And when I find you..." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. I bit down hard on my lip, tasting the sharp tang of blood, stifling a whimper. Time stretched into an agonizing crawl. Daylight bled from the sky, yet Silas showed no sign of abandoning the hunt. I heard him circling, sometimes retreating, sometimes drawing terrifyingly close. My body protested the cramped confinement, aching in every joint, but fear held me motionless. As true night descended, wrapping the woods in inky blackness, a fresh wave of panic washed over me. How could I navigate this maze in the dark? Evading Silas might only lead to a slower death from exposure. Just as despair threatened to consume me, a new sound intruded. Voices, plural. At first, a trick of frayed nerves, perhaps, but no, distinctly human, drawing nearer. Silas, you still out here? A rough voice bellowed. My stomach plummeted. He wasn't alone. Of course. This was perhaps routine for them. A gruesome pastime, collecting stranded souls like trophies. Over here, Silas yelled back. Little bird flew the coop, but she's close. Can't have gotten far. I held my breath as multiple pairs of footsteps converged near my log sanctuary. Beams from flashlights sliced through the darkness, sweeping the forest floor, passing dangerously close. Fan out, Silas commanded. Check everywhere. I squeezed my eyes shut, whispering a silent, desperate plea. And then, impossibly, an answer. A distant wail. Thin at first, then swelling, unmistakably, a siren. The footsteps faltered. Damn it, one of the men spat. Law. How in blazes did they track us here? Another demanded, raw panic coloring his tone. Doesn't matter, Silas snapped, his voice tight with urgency. Move, now. I listened, scarcely daring to breathe, as their frantic retreat faded into the rustling night. Still, I remained entombed, convinced it might be a ruse. But the sirens grew undeniable, accompanied by the crunch of tires on unseen gravel nearby. Car doors opened and slammed shut. Official voices called out, identifying themselves. Police! Is anyone out here? Yet I waited, paralyzed by caution, until a bright beam pinned my hiding spot, and a calm female voice inquired, Miss, are you inside? It's okay, you can come out. We're the police. You're safe. Slowly, stiffly, I extracted myself from the log's putrid embrace. A uniformed woman helped me stand, wrapping a coarse blanket around my trembling shoulders. You're safe now, she repeated gently, guiding me toward the flashing lights of an ambulance. We received an anonymous call about suspicious activity back down the highway. Lucky timing. As paramedics assessed me, the story unfolded. Silas and his associates were part of a predatory crew that had plagued the remote highways for months. My desperate flight, coupled with that unknown benefactor's tip, had finally led to their capture. Later, cocooned in the sterile quiet of the police station, recounting the ordeal, the chilling reality struck. How easily I could have vanished, become another cold case file. The terror left its mark, etching scars deeper than the cuts and bruises. But I had breathed the forest air and felt the earth beneath my feet after believing I wouldn't. I had endured. Stepping out from the station into the pale wash of early morning, I felt fragile, yet strangely forged. Whatever roads lay ahead, whatever shadows lingered, I knew, with a certainty born of survival, that I possessed the strength to meet them. Having walked through that night, I could walk through anything.